Hi everyone. This video is going to help you to have a review of different aspects of monitoring projects. We already discussed about different phases of a project, and we obviously know now that the third phase of a project is about execution. And during execution, the role of both the team leaders and the project manager is about monitoring projects. So what is monitoring all about? It for sure involves communicating status and advancements and progress to various stakeholders. So communication with the stakeholders is going to be absolutely critical and central in monitoring. So throughout the project lifecycle, you absolutely need to keep stakeholders informed about the way you are just moving forward and the kind of issues, problems that you are facing. So find out how to keep various stakeholders informed. And the goal is for sure that there is no surprise and unpleasant surprises mainly to various stakeholders. So they have to be kept informed. So communication, you will keep stakeholders appraised of how the project is progressing, what problems you are facing, and how you are dealing now with those problems. Shareholders, but also other stakeholders, being customers or other parties involved in and that have a vested interest in your project, they want continuous updates. And so what you need to do is, for instance, to put in place a monthly meeting that is complemented with, for instance, weekly status reports online. In communicating about the project, do not downplay or hide problems. Here to some degree, we have to accept that we need to prove transparency. And if you do this, and the problems would sabotage the project, in your stakeholders' eyes, you will be even in more trouble than if you had alerted your stakeholders well in advance in the first place. So how to monitor schedule and what is it all about? Monitoring is first we discussed that earlier in the first part of this course. We said that what is it that we control in organizations, and this also applies to projects. We monitor performance. Okay, so how is it that we monitor schedule in terms of performance, in terms of time? Okay, so the questions that we have to ask ourselves is about how much work has been done on any activity in terms of timing. So does the number of worked hours match the number of the work hours that we had initially planned in our project plan? And in terms of activities, we have to ask ourselves the question, which activities we have worked on, and when did they start, when is it that they completed, and were they finished on schedule? And if some activities went beyond control and beyond schedule, we need to find out why. We have to keep an eye on milestones, for instance. So have milestones been reached? And if so, which ones? And if not, which ones and why? And in terms of deliverables, have we been on time to deliver the planned? And when we delivered, did we meet all the quality requirements and the quality standards? And if not, what is it that caused any kind of shortfall? Delays and scheduling problems can also result from vague project objectives, optimistic schedule, incomplete project plan, failure to manage predefined risks. So we will be working, we will be definitely digging deeper into what risk management is. So, and if we fail in managing risks, so we definitely might face scheduling problems and a lack of proper tracking and control over the project. So if your project experiences scheduling problems, so usually we first have to find out what has caused these problems, and we need to take corrective measures as we move forward. Either we ask for additional resources now that we went beyond schedule, or we can put the schedule on an accelerated course. This is what we called crashing. Some milestones, some activities, some tasks, and or we can try to persuade the sponsors, so people who are controlling our project or have authority over our project, to accept additional delay in the yet to come deliveries and milestones. Some tips for controlling project delays are the following. First, to renegotiate. Discuss with various stakeholders the possibility to extend deadlines. Or if you, as a second tip, if you happen to be late in the early phases of the project, you probably can think about if there is room to recover in the later steps, okay? If there is any kind of flexibility left in the later and yet to come milestones or whatever. As a third tip, we can think about maybe narrowing the project scope. As we narrow the scope, we have chances to reduce the time left to complete the project. And as we can see at the bottom of this slide, deploying more resources that can absolutely help to accelerate, to reaching the next milestones. We can also seek alternative sources if any kind of time. So we went beyond control and that we are late, we can, and that this is related to a problem faced with within our supply chain, suppliers, we can try to switch to new suppliers. Or as another way to think about controlling delays is about accepting partial delivery. Whenever possible, if required, we can think about our next delivery to be partial and trying to catch up and complete this delivery later on. And we can also, for sure, offer incentives or offer bonuses. And so for on-time delivery, when we are facing critical milestones where being on time is absolutely important. So generally, what we care about is the scope of the project. So this means that we need to overall keep an eye on the scope to avoid scope creep, as discussed earlier in this course. So if stakeholders in the project accomplish more than its original plan, so we have to discuss the potential impact, as we said, on project timing, cost, and quality, and clearly point out that we need new compromises and trade-offs as we move forward. Monitoring budget, for sure. Comparing actual spending for a given period of time with the spending amounts that were initially planned in our documents, in the charter, for instance, and the scope and the scope document. If actual spending is higher, we absolutely need to justify, first to identify what are the root causes of this budget that went beyond a set limit, and then we have to absolutely report this, and then we need to take corrective actions. There are we obviously know that there are factors that usually send your project over budget. These are about failure to factor in currency exchanges, sometimes unexpected inflation rates, lack of firm prices from suppliers and subcontractors. So we obviously know that large corporations can make use of specific techniques. There are financial approaches toward hedging some financial risks in terms of the price of the supply, right? And so these are called derivatives. And estimates based on different costing methods such as hours versus dollars, right? So that is about one of the factors also that can impact budget. Unplanned personal costs that we had not initially planned, unexpected space or training needs, or consultants and legal fees that were not initially planned. And lastly, monitoring project is about monitoring risks. So we absolutely have a chapter developed on project risks management, and we are just going to switch to these slides to move forward with that one. Okay, so project risk management. In this new chapter, we are just going to first define what risk means, and then how is it we have to think about the risks to a project, and how is it we have to manage these risks. Okay. First, we need to have the right definition of risk. If we look at the dictionary, the risk is a chance or possibility of danger, loss, injury, or other kind of adverse consequences. And usually something that is at risk, we understand it as something that is exposed to a kind of danger. So within the general understanding, risk is used to signify usually negative consequences. However, taking a risk can also result in a positive outcome. And a third possibility is that risk is related to uncertainty of outcome. And now we have to keep in mind the appropriate definition, the right definition of risk in our context. Usually in the business enterprise defines risk as the following. Organizations of all types and sizes will be facing internal and external factors that might influence and make it or make it uncertain whether and when they will be achieving their objectives. Right. So the effect of the uncertainty on organizational objectives is called risk. At least this is the definition we have to adopt and integrate in order to understand what risk means in organizations and in projects, obviously. We constantly try to manage risk, and when we will be exchanging during the online course, we can interact on the matter. And we define 3 categories of risk. So first, hazard or pure risks, second, control or uncertainty risks, and third, opportunity risks. Hazard risks are the kind of events that only result in negative outcomes, and it's kind of difficult to have a 100% control over them. They usually go beyond our control, right? And these kind of risks are usually insurable. The second kind of risk is called control risks. These are those that give rise to uncertainty about the outcome of a situation. So when we are thinking about projects, it might control risk might be related to timing, to resources, to quality, customer satisfaction, budget, etc. Well, organizations manage these risks in order to ensure that the outcome of the business activities are going to fall within a desired range. And the purpose here is to reduce the gap between the expected results and the actual results that we will be reaching. And the third category of risk is about organizations take market and commercial risks in order to achieve positive returns. This can be considered as an opportunity risk, which to the relationship between risk and reward. Okay, so this is about the third category of risk. So organizations, what approach we should think about having toward these different categories of risk. So organizations will usually seek to mitigate hazard risk, they manage control risks, and they would embrace opportunity risks. And there are various strategies for managing a given risk. Either we accept risk, or the other term is about tolerating the risk, or we transfer fully or partially that risk to a third party, or we eliminate the risk, and this is kind of exit strategy, or we control through building safeguards all around our operations and processes, and we ensure that the staff will be managing those risks. So how is it that we can measure and manage risk? There are risk factors. So obviously we try to measure nearly everything in business, and it's a matter of effectiveness and in fact more generally a matter of performance. If we can't measure, we can't compare the expected result and the actual result, right? So we need to measure, and here we are to measure risk. So how is it that we can measure risk? Risk factors are about probability of occurrence and the severity of impact when they occur. So here on this graph, on the horizontal axis, we have the probability of occurrence, and on the vertical axis, we have the severity. This means that we can broadly divide this graph into 4 categories. Those risks that have a high probability of occurrence, and when they occur, they have a very high impact. And so these require absolute priority in terms of attention and effort. And on the opposite, we have the low probability and low impact risks. We might only need to know these risks and keep an eye on them, but not much effort will be spent because obviously we have limited resources. And for sure, we need as a second priority to focus on these two intermediary situations where we have either a low probability and high impact, or a low impact and a high probability. And yes, the formula is important here, and we measure risk and by multiplying its probability by its severity. Okay, so O it stands for occurrence, and S for severity. Okay. All right. So, what is risk management? Risk management is the process first identifying, then measuring, and then trying to minimize uncertain events that are attached to our goals, related to our goals and objectives. Risk management is then the process whereby organizations with a methodical approach address all of these that are related to their activities. And here we are just focusing on projects, so our project risks. So evaluating and controlling risks will ensure that we will not be losing opportunities, and that our competitive advantage is kept over time, maintained over time, and that when we will be activities, we will be spending less time firefighting. And this is a very important point that we need to develop when we will be interacting during the online course. Risk management is here to help reduce surprises. This means that what business entrepreneurs and project leaders need is a certain degree of visibility and predictability, right? So in order to help our project and our achievements more predictable, right, and more likely to achieve our goals, right? So what we do is that we try to apply some degree of control, and we try to have what we call contingency plans, and trying to in advance before we start the project to think about many different kinds of problems that would make it uncertain whether we will be reaching our goals and that we will be delivering on time, within budget, and in line with the quality requirements of our customer. So we need a framework. We clearly need a technique to address risks, and this technique is called the FMEA. FMEA stands for Failure Mode and Effects Analysis. So ranking a given risk is still about measuring occurrence of a failure. When we are talking here about the failure, is a potential failure of any kind of characteristic or feature of our product, right? Occurrence of the failure, severity of any kind of failure, and the detection of the failure. So as a result, what you note here is that we have been adding a new factor that is called detection, and we will be digging deeper into that in the next slides. So we absolutely need to measure then three factors: occurrence, severity, and detection, and calculating a what we call the RPN, risk priority number, for each single risk identified for our related to our project. So occurrence is the first factor we measure. We can absolutely consider ranking between 1 and 10. 10 would mean that failure is almost inevitable. And if we rank it 1, this means that the unlikely, okay? And any kind of intermediary, so this has to be discussed and used as a scale. Then we have severity. So we rank severity 10 for a given risk. This means that there is so very high severity ranking when a potential failure mode affects safe system operations without warning. And if we rank it 1, this means that severity is very low, so it's very low impact, right, or nearly no effect, or even no effect. And detection. Usually what business enterprises do is that when they produce any kind of product, they would be applying some degree of stress testing to ensure that the features are going to be functional, fully functional, in line with customer expectations. So if we are able to, if we think for a given risk that our systems and our processes are able to help us detect this failure before the product goes in the customer's hand, we would rank this risk at 1. And if we think that in the early phases of a project, or before we start the project, that a given risk might of failure is high in terms of detection, this means that our current processes and functions and resources cannot help detect such a failure. So this means that we certainly have to address this problem before the products go in the hands of the customer, once they will be available. And yes, risk management is a process, as we stated before, and as any process, it includes steps. So the first step of the risk management as a process is about identifying our project's exposure to various kinds of uncertainties. And for sure, it requires an intimate knowledge of the organization, of its industry, and its operations context. It requires to know the general environment of the business and the development of a sound understanding of its strategic and operational objectives. So here are the different steps from top to bottom. All of those green boxes are telling us more about any single step that we take in order to complete and to execute this risk management process. The first step is the one indicated on top of that, on top of the whole boxes. It's called establishing the context and reviewing objectives, to have a good understanding of the context of the business and of the project. Then we try to enter the second phase, which is identifying all of the different risks related to our and its modes and functionalities. Once we have identified all of those risks, as a third step, we will start analyzing and estimating. This means measuring severity, probability, and detectability. Then we need to prioritize risk, and the very reason is that we can't focus on all of these items that we have recorded in our risk register simultaneously, because no one has enough resources to do all of this in parallel. Okay, so we do our best to prioritize, and then we will be assigning responsibility and allocating resources to focus on each priority kind of risk. Then we follow up, we monitor, we report, and we rank again all of these risks that we work out on a regular basis, right? And we, as this arrow is this feedback arrow is indicating, we are just going back to the risk analysis. So as we work these risks, we try to enter a kind of minimization loop until this any single risk is fallen within a kind of acceptable range in terms of probability, in terms of impact and detectability. And this is what in risk management we call a continuous improvement process. This is an absolute quality concept. And very often you will be hearing this in the name of PDCA cycle. So PDCA stands for plan, do, check, and act, right? So we establish objectives, we implement what we intend to implement and do, then we check if outcome is in line with with expectations, and then we take new measures or new steps and new actions, right? And we repeat this over time. It's not only applied to project management, risk management, but generally talking, this is at the heart of any quality management system. And for sure, this PDCA approach absolutely helps develop what we call risk-based thinking, right? Risk-based thinking. Here we have an example of an FMEA worksheet in a healthcare application from the Houston Harris County in the United States, and this is about the psychiatric center. So as you can see here, you need a framework. This is a risk register, so you can absolutely use an Excel sheet, as you can see, at the bottom of this slide. And in these three different categories, so factors about here, they call the probability, frequency, and then severity, and then detectability. So and here we in a hospital, so it's a care center. We obviously customer focus is about health and safety of patients. Okay, so frequency means that maybe any kind of failure, if it's ranked, for instance, 10, this may happen several times a year, and that if they rank it about 1, this kind of failure they might affect health and safety of patients may happen only sometimes, right during a year. Severity is about, if it's ranked 10 on this sheet, It's about failure that can result in or serious harm. And if it's ranked 1, it's about failure not noticeable or would not affect delivery or service. And when we talk about detectability here, what we see is that if they rank it 10, it's less than 50% of the time. And if it's rank 1, error would be discovered 90% of the time before it reaches the patient. Okay. All right, so that is the last slide of our risk management and project monitoring chapter. Very soon we will be interacting on the matter, so I would be glad to see what you think, and I would be glad to interact with you and try to answer your potential questions. Have a good day.